Well, hi, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas, and we both work in the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources. And, it's December, Billy. Can you believe
I
it?
know, Renee, December 1st. Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you with us. Yeah, it's been an interesting year, to say the least.
Definitely, definitely.
But we certainly appreciate y'all being with us. For regular viewers, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're a newbie, welcome to From the Woods Today. This is a great show, and we've got some great guests today. Really excited to have our very own Dr. Matt Springer going to be talking about some wildlife-friendly trees. We have Laurie Thomas going to be talking about Christmas trees. 'Tis the season, Renee.
Season,
People are
exactly.
starting to look for Christmas trees. And then we have, again, our very own Dr. Ellen Crocker talking about something that's been bugging the trees. So we'll save that and let you see what's been bugging some trees and causing some damage out there. You may have seen it in your woods or around your home as well. So a great show. Again, glad to have you all with us today. You can interact with us via the chat pod if you're on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook Live, please use the comment section and we'll respond as quick as possible. But glad to be with you, Renee.
Yeah, thank you. And, so let's go ahead and get started. Matt, if you can, there you are. Tell us a little bit about your segment today.
Well, since not so much on Christmas trees, but we are going to talk a little bit about some wildlife-friendly trees. We are approaching the time of year you want to be planting trees if you're looking at trying to diversify your property or doing some active management. So, potentially a good time to start thinking about what trees, if you want to go the wildlife route, what you may be looking at, or at least get an idea of.
Okay. We look forward to it.
All right. So with wildlife and trees, or, in general, there's a few rules of thumb if you're thinking about implementing management strategies to benefit wildlife on your property. And if they involve trees, and we can start talking about potential options. There's some generalizations that I want to mention, and then as well as getting into some specifics with certain species that will benefit certain types of wildlife. And this will be, I think, the only picture of a non-native tree and wildlife I have in the entire segment. But this is unfortunately one of those negative interactions we sometimes see with wildlife, especially if you were hoping to eat some of those apples here soon, as many of our larger mammals also appreciate apple trees and their fruits. But in general, there's a ton of species within Kentucky and our region that rely on trees for some part of their life cycle. Sometimes it may be very much almost entirely tied to a tree. Other times it may just be as they are migrating through, roosting in a tree at night. But with the 500 plus species of traditional, what we think of as wildlife, many of them are using trees at some point or another. Now, what does that mean in terms of what do they provide? Well, it kind of depends. Every wildlife species or group of species are going to utilize the trees in different ways. And that's important to understand if you are looking at trying to manage for wildlife on your property or in your forest. You have to kind of understand what species you're looking to manage for, so you can do a little bit of research to understand how they use certain tree species, which will guide your management strategy. As I mentioned, it can be short components. It could be entirely obligated to the forest. Examples on the extreme end are things like rough grouse are especially tied to early successional forest, where if they don't have that present, they're really not going to be present on your property. Other times, we have species that use it for breeding season. We have about 150 breeding birds in Kentucky. A good chunk of those are either forested species or may utilize young trees and grasslands as they're growing up for nesting or cover. They also may utilize the trees as a food source, maybe the actual mass that is produced by the trees, as well as things like insects that are using the tree for their own food or cover. So a diversity of tree species also has a diversity of insects that use them, which then can provide and support more wildlife species. So in some ways, having a diverse forest or having a diversity of trees in your yard is going to help provide ample food via the insect route and the trophic levels. The other way, as I kind of mentioned, for food that, with wildlife and trees, is the actual production of mast, right? So whether that's soft mast, hard mast, that in itself is highly nutritious to many species. We just went through a period with all the acorns dropping in our woods in the state, and many animals like deer, turkeys, bear, are a lot of rodents are going to key heavily in on those acorns because of the nutritional value they possess. Other fleshy fruits that are grown, whether they be persimmons, there's a bunch of smaller berries that are produced. Cherries are another example. Are heavily favored and highly valued by many bird species and mammal species as well. And there's the actual component where trees get consumed themselves. The buds of the trees, leaf material, and so on can be consumed directly by wildlife, and therefore, a diversity of trees is going to provide basically a buffet of vegetation for many species to consume. In addition to the food component, you have a cover component where many situations trees are providing the structure in the landscape that is going to give animals escape cover from predators. It may give them thermal cover during storm events, provide them a place to go in the daytime resting or nighttime roosting for things like turkeys. Multiple components provided just by the fact that the tree is there. Then there's the reproductive component where you may have animals that are nesting in cavities, woodpeckers, wood ducks, chickadees. There's a bunch of different species that will use the tree and the cavity that's created either by a woodpecker or another event as their basically their reproductive area. And if they don't have it, they are not going to reproduce in that area. There's the actual structure that's there to allow birds to build nests in. There's also things like roosting habitat, which I'm going to get into, that can also act as a reproductive habitat for things like bats and their maternity colonies that they have, where you may have their pups in the actual tree itself because of the cavity that's created or the thermal zone that's created from things like shagbark hickory. So there's a bunch of different ways trees can help wildlife. Sometimes they're not immediately obvious. Things like drum logs for grouse, where if they don't have a log present to do their little display on, they're going to have a hard time attracting a mate. It can be things like hunting perches for herons or raptors, or it could be, the tool they use to dam up a river to create the pond and the habitat they need, as is the case with beavers. So there's a bunch of different things that trees do provide for wildlife. Now, if you're thinking about managing wildlife and trying to benefit wildlife with trees, there's a lot of options, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a large property full of trees to benefit wildlife. It can be done in small backyards. It can be done on medium-sized properties. Making sure, first and foremost, the easiest thing you can do is making sure that you have a healthy landscape on your property, free of invasive species, good diverse stand, is a very simple way of benefiting wildlife. You don't have to necessarily plant new trees or do active management in terms of harvest to shift things in a certain direction. If you have a healthy forest in Kentucky, you are benefiting a lot of different wildlife species. If you want to think about doing that, and you may not know a good starting place, do I even have a healthy forest? This is a great chance to bring in some of our state agencies that can help you in terms of guiding you on what you may or may not need to do on your property to benefit wildlife. So the Division of Forestry, getting a forest management plan, or reaching out to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources and their farm bill biologists to come up with a wildlife management plan for your property are great avenues to kind of reach that goal. But simple rules outside of that, if you get those management plans, many of these things are going to be included, are any tree that is native to Kentucky, to the area that you are residing or managing, is going to provide something for wildlife. It is, if it is a species that they evolved within the area, they're going to probably utilize it in some way, shape, or form. Ideally, we want to try to encourage trees that can provide multiple resources. So, pretty much every tree provides cover. We want to try to encourage species that may also provide food to, some wildlife group along the way during the year. Or, you may encourage trees that provide some kind of roosting habitat for bats, say. So best case scenario, you provide multiple things with one tree species. Almost all the trees we have are going to support some level of insect life. So in some ways, it doesn't really matter if it's native, it's going to have some bugs on it. And bugs equal food for many wildlife species. So it also coincides that many of our mass producing species, especially our oaks, and beech and hickories, also support an incredible diversity of insects. So in many ways, you get it to double dip in terms of wildlife benefit. You get the mass production, you also get the insect production. So when we start thinking about trees for wildlife, and in essence, we're talking food, right? So the best thing to do is you look at, all right, every tree provides cover. How do I make sure most food needs can be met on my property, or at least in the area of my property? First and foremost, you can start thinking about the groups of trees, whether it's hard mass producing or soft mass. In hard mass, the groups of trees that benefit wildlife the most are things like oak, hickory, and beech. These are all going to benefit, especially larger bodied wildlife species, quite a bit. But as I just mentioned, these groups of trees are also heavy supporters of insect life and a diversity of a lot of Lepidoptera species. So your moths, your butterflies, which are really favored quite highly by many bird species and bat species as food sources. So these are the groups that you want to look at. In terms of soft mass, you're looking at quite a few. There's a good diversity of tree species that you can utilize, ranging from sumac, which has a really great benefit for bird species, as their seed is preferred by many different winter birds that we have here. In terms of other mass producers, serviceberry, dogwood, mulberry are heavily favored when they're on the trees. They are picked by mammal species and also birds as well. And then when you get a little bit larger into things like persimmons, you're starting to lose the benefit to many of the smaller species like the avians, but you are gaining a benefit to larger species, white-tailed deer, groundhogs, raccoons, coyotes are really fond of persimmons. So, you can look at basically anywhere you can provide multiple hard mass and soft mass on your property at the same time is a good thing. Finally, some of the last big group of trees here that I want to touch on are your thermal cover, your pines, your cedars that are going to provide a pretty big benefit, especially during winter storms. Because if they're growing together, they can shelter a lot of animals from high winds, rain events, snow events. So we see a lot of use of cedar thickets during those extreme weather events. Also, some species will readily consume that soft mass that's produced by these guys, as well as the seeds in the pine cones if they can get access to them. So they are duly beneficial in many ways that hardwoods are not in winter, as well as providing a food source. So it's always good to have a few of these guys somewhere present, usually bunched together to get that thermal benefit. Now, in terms of backyard management, really anytime you can provide any of these species in a urban suburban setting, you're going to benefit wildlife. It's especially true if you can really go away from non-native landscaping and shift towards native landscaping, as a lot of our smaller species, our more mobile species, can take advantage of backyards in ways that will allow them to benefit their populations. Think bluebirds, especially, have done quite well. Hummingbirds. Anytime you have just a small yard with a lot of good resources in it, things are going to use it. And as long as you don't have a cat in your yard, you're going to have a positive impact generally on the population. So unfortunately, I'm going to really quickly mention this on the urban side. If you build resources like that in your backyard, be prepared, as you know, there are potential downsides. You are inviting an environment to welcome wildlife, so try to be ready to welcome them, or at least deal with the problems as best you can. Now, with that, there's a lot of information that's out there present on selecting trees for wildlife. Purdue has a great publication on the benefits to specific wildlife species for each tree species that is commonly used in the landscape or found in the landscape. There's also strategies. The books that were in the previous slide here, Gardening for Birds by my predecessor, Tom Barnes, gives you great ideas on how to lay out your yard if you're interested in doing that. As well as, I mentioned reaching out to our agencies, state agencies, to get some guidance if you haven't already done so. And with that, I will happily take questions, although I'm going to very quickly here make sure I put a nod to Lori, as she always has great information on all her Kentucky trees for wildlife benefits. So eventually I won't have to say go to the Purdue website. I will say go watch Lori's videos for all the information you need to know about wildlife.
Go watch this tree of the week, all right?
Yes, exactly.
Matt, you covered a lot of ground there. Fortunately, folks, if you missed any of it, we will have these recordings available for you. But Matt, I also appreciate you pointing out a lot of the support that's available, because there is a lot of help out there for folks doing this. And, often landowners are interested in managing the property for wildlife and the get-go. So I really appreciate you and talking about how those all play together so nicely.
So Matt, does it matter what tree you plant?
Well, that is I would say that's a really good question for foresters, but I will answer it in this fashion.
Right tree, right place, right?
That's exactly right.
Yep.
So make sure that you are picking trees that are going to succeed in the area you plant them. It's not a good idea to put a persimmon in the middle of a forest, right? So they're an edge species. Also the soil soil issues and so on and so forth. So make sure that, you may see a tree that has an incredible wildlife benefit and you may want it to exist in a certain place. It may not want to. So
makes sense.
Save yourself the time, hassle, and frustrations, and make sure you do that little bit of research on the front end.
Yeah.
Okay. We did get a question that came in. It's when culling invasives like autumn olive using stump cut, is it better for wildlife to leave the debris or remove it completely?
Ooh.
But might have to get it.
Ellen, you there?
Ellen.
One of the things that's making me nervous if those things still have berries on them,
Yeah,
so I think it's when we're doing some of those treatments, Ellen?
Yeah, most of the time it's recommended just to, drop the tops and leave them there. And they'll decay pretty rapidly. So you might as well just leave them there and save yourself that work. Now you might want to move them around a little bit just to facilitate your management. It can be a pain to try to cut them if they're all over the place. So a lot of people will kind of pile them up, but then leave them locally. And you'd be amazed by how quickly some of these shrubs will break down. But I do agree with what Billy said in terms of if they are in seed right then, you definitely want to leave them because you don't want to introduce those to new areas. And that's generally not, that's generally a challenging time just because if they're in seed, those seeds are going to develop and they're going to grow. So if they are, just really make sure to come back the following spring and treat or remove any sprouts that come up.
One of the management strategies that we will have a program on here probably in the spring is the wildlife cover piles, basically. And ideally, you can do that with, when you're doing FSI, TSI with the smaller trees you're getting rid of or clearing out, where you basically build the cover that is now lacking using those materials. And the seed source with the invasives is the concern. However, if you're completely in a thicket full of autumn olive and you're clearing the entire thing, you could pile it up right in the middle and there's going to be seeds everywhere no matter what. But at least there you have a wildlife cover basically established that they can use until, unfortunately, probably all the invasives grow back up. But you can battle it and long term. It's still good to make those piles short term, especially if you're clearing out an entire area.
Matt, can you explain a little bit of some of those acronyms you just mentioned?
Forest stand improvement,
FSI,
timber stand improvement.
Yeah.
So that those are active management strategies for woodlands to hopefully improve them or set your forest stand in a direction that you're trying to achieve for your management strategy. So you're removing certain species of trees or individual trees to help you achieve management goals.
Yeah.
All right.
The forestry person, is somehow sinking in here, I guess.
Yeah. Osmosis.
He brought you over to the dark side.
Hey, trees provide the habitat for a lot of wildlife. So
yes,
they do.
We got to work together for sure. Oh, Dr. Springer, appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys have a great day.
All right, you too.
All right. So moving on, it's that time of year, 'tis the season.
Still
and,
talking trees.
Christmas trees. So
Yes.
we have our own Lori Thomas talking about Christmas trees today.
Sure. Yeah. So I've got just a little short PowerPoint on Christmas trees in Kentucky and to find some information. And with that, I'll share my screen. Okay. So it is Christmas tree time for many of us here. And whether you want to cut your own tree or have it cut for you, you don't want to go out there and get on the ground and do it, or buy one that's already been cut, or even buy a balled and burlap, that living Christmas tree that you can plant after the season. Kentucky's got a lot of different Christmas tree farms and tree lots to choose from. So many of our Christmas tree farms opened their gates that third week of November. There are a few that are opening up this weekend. A lot of them are only open on weekends. But you can, when you've decided you pick the farm that's close to you or the lot, make sure that you check in with them. Most of them have asked that you call in advance to either make reservations or to make sure they're still selling trees. I know there's at least one Christmas tree farm that's already sold out for the season here in central Kentucky. And you also want to make sure what their current protocols are. And from our farms, most of our Christmas tree farms, and even a few of the lots, you can get trees that you cut yourself, they're pre-cut, or you can get the balled and burlap, those living Christmas trees that you can plant after the season. There are a couple of websites that can help you locate Christmas tree farms. There is the Kentucky Christmas Tree Association, and it lists the 17 different Christmas tree farms that are part of this cooperative of Christmas tree growers around the state. And you can actually see that on the map. Some of those may be near you. And you can actually click on their websites and find out if they're open and what kind of trees they're selling. But if there's not one of those that are near you, you can check with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture Christmas trees, and they're Kentucky Proud, and they're going to list, in addition to Christmas tree farms, they're going to list lots as well, and also Christmas tree farms that are not members of the Christmas Tree Association, the Kentucky Christmas Tree Association. And you can also check out pickyourownChristmasTree.org, and that's going to give you a county by county listing of lots and Christmas tree growers. So that are members of the cooperative and that are not members of the cooperative. So you got lots of options of finding a Christmas tree farm or lot near you. So I wanted to cover a few of the Christmas tree types that our growers in this state grow that are typically used for Christmas trees. And there's about 11 different species of what we call Christmas trees that are that grow reasonably well here in the state. There are the fir trees, which is usually what our family gets as a type of fir. And firs are characterized by, they have a really nice natural conical shape. Granted, they're pruned up that way too. And they tend to have strong branches and flat needles that are not sharp, so it makes it nice when you're decorating. And they tend to have a pretty medium to strong fragrance, so it's really nice when you bring it into the house. And these include, from most of our growers around here, balsam fir, Canaan fir, Douglas fir, and Fraser fir. And then there are the pines that you'll find. Some of these will be pre-cut, but our growers around here grow eastern white pine. And I actually covered it as a tree of the week recently. It is a common Christmas tree around here. And as you know, eastern white pine has the softer needles. So it's not the best tree sometimes for some heavier ornaments, just depending on how you want to decorate. And then there's Scots pine or Scotch pine that is commonly grown as well. And then there's the spruces, and the spruces are noted again for the nice conical shape. They do have sturdy branches, so they hold those ornaments, but they do have pointed needles. They tend to have those sharp needles, so care should be taken when decorating with those. And around here, those include Colorado blue spruce and white spruce. And occasionally you'll find Norway spruce. Usually it's pre-cut, but you can find Norway spruce as well. So just a few fun facts. I always like to include some fun facts about trees. So a few fun facts about our Christmas, some of these species. Douglas fir makes up nearly half of all the Christmas trees grown in the United States. It's a biggie, and it's one we'll find cut a lot. Like if you go to Home Depot or your grocery store, you'll usually see those out there. And then white pine is the largest pine in the United States. A big, beautiful tree in nature out there. Scotch pine is the national tree of Scotland, and the blue spruce is the state tree of Colorado. So just a few fun facts about some of those species. Once you've gotten your tree, you want to make sure you take proper care of it. And this is referring to pre-cut, or if you've cut a tree or you've bought a pre-cut tree. So a cut tree, typically when a Christmas tree is cut, over half of its weight is in water. But with proper care, you can maintain the quality of the tree through the Christmas season. But you want to follow a couple of tips, and you can find more of these tips. I've just put a few of them in here, but you can find more of these tips at the Kentucky Christmas Tree Growers Association website, and they have a drop-down tab that lists about 15 different tips for proper care of your cut Christmas tree, as well as your live tree that you're going to plant after the season. So check those out if you get one of those trees. But the first thing, you want to make sure you make a fresh cut to remove about 1/4 of an inch to 1 inch thick disc of wood from the base of the trunk before you put that tree in a stand. You want it to be able to take up that water. And once your tree's at home, you want to make sure that you put that tree in water as soon as possible. And if you can't get it in water, you're not going to decorate it. You want to still put it in water outside or in a cool place. And as a general rule, your tree stand should provide about 1/4 of a water per inch of stem diameter. And so you want to make sure that stem's always in touch. It's always in touch with that water. And you want to keep displayed trees away from heat sources like a fire, a wood burning fire, or a stove, or even a heat vent. Like ours sits near a heat vent, so I just close it off during the Christmas season. And you want to make sure you check that stand daily for water. Make sure you keep water in that tree. And you want to use some type of lighting that produces low heat. A lot of our miniature lights do anymore, but some of those larger ones can produce a heat. So that'll keep that tree from drying out. And then once the Christmas season is over, and there are a couple of places to find out where to recycle your tree If you don't have a recycling program, Christmas tree recycling program in your town through your city garbage pickup, we do here in Lexington and Fayette County, but I don't have city pickup. So I would go to one of these other sources in order to recycle my Christmas tree in a good way that is good for our environment. But you could check out the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources Christmas tree recycling, or you can go to pick your Christmas tree recycling as well. And they're going to list county by county different recycling programs or places that you can drop your tree off. So that your tree, not only did it provide a great decoration for you in the growing season, it now can provide either for mulch or for wildlife throughout the rest of the year. So with that, just a few tips on Christmas trees this year. And I hope everyone has a great season.
Wonderful, Lori. Thank you so much for that. You know, I was wondering, is there an average price for a Christmas tree, or is it kind of vary per lot?
I think it probably varies. I know around Lexington, I can speak for Lexington because we've seen them. And I don't know what it is by foot, but for cut trees already, we're looking at 6 to 7 foot trees running at least $50 to up to $70. And now when you go to a lot, it may be a little, when you go to a Christmas tree farm, it may be a little different depending on what you're getting and depending on what they're providing you, if they're already cutting it or if you're going to go out and cut it. So check with those. If you're going to go visit a Christmas tree farm, just check and see what their prices are. Most of them list, or you'll call them. A lot of them require reservations anyway right now.
Yeah. But I would argue, Laura, if you go to a Christmas tree farm and you cut your own tree, you're really paying for entertainment and, you know, an experience for your family, as well as bringing home something that our growers have been working for 8 or 9 years on, you know.
Exactly. And it makes a day of it. It's a family fun adventure. A lot of the Christmas tree farms around here have additional things going on. You can buy wreaths, they have hot chocolate, some of them, you know, and maybe not this year still during COVID times, but have had, you know, wagon rides and things like other things that go on there as well. So it makes a great little adventure. Go out for the day. I know Dr. Crocker went out and got a Christmas tree at one of our local Christmas tree farms, and I'm sure it was a family fun event. So yeah, it's a good thing. And I'll ask Dr. Matt Springer to even mention a little bit about our Christmas tree recycling program with, especially the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, so one of the ways that when the season's over, that's a great use of the tree and it's after Christmas life is generally there's drop-off locations throughout the state of Kentucky. Those Christmas trees are used heavily for fish management, where they will take them and sink them into places like Cave Run Lake to provide structure for fish habitat, as well as in certain situations, they are used to create those wildlife brush piles as the basis for it, since they don't have seed issues to worry about. But they can provide long-lasting benefits for both fish and wildlife. And, you know, you have a larger property, you don't necessarily need to go take it out. You can throw it in your backyard, especially near a bird feeder, and get the same benefits without taking it for a ride.
That's what we do at my house.
Yeah. Matt, I appreciate you mentioning the tree drop-off thing, because I know that a few of the times I've been fishing here on some of Kentucky's lakes, you can actually find on the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources the locations, like the GPS locations of where they drop those. So if you're looking for good fish habitat and other things, that's kind of an added benefit that you can remember those Christmas trees help.
Yes, they will help. If you are a fisherman, they make those open access information so you can find out everywhere they drop those trees on an annual basis, and they last about 4 to 5 years before they break down if they're underwater. So not so much if they're in your backyard. No. And generally those drop-off locations are listed on the webpage, the main launching pad page for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. And most places are consistent. I know Jacobson Park usually in Lexington has a drop-off location, but sometimes they change. So make sure you look for that list if you're interested.
Yeah, and they have a map up on the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. I don't know that they've updated it for 2021. It's still early. No one's, recycling their trees yet. So, but they usually have a map that you can locate where to drop your Christmas tree off.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We greatly
Yeah.
appreciate both of you. Again, Matt, again. It's going to be the Matt show today.
I know, that's all right. We love Matt.
We do. All right. Next up.
Yeah.
Next up is Dr. Ellen Crocker. She's going to be talking about what's bugging my tree.
Hey there, everyone. Nice to be on today.
How are you?
Doing great. So today we're going to talk about something, we were debating now that the trees have lost their leaves, what kind of things become more evident this time of year?
Mhm.
And judging from my inbox and the questions I've received, this is one of them. And this isn't the only time of year that you can see the damage, but this is the time of year when it becomes more noticeable because trees lose their leaves.
Oh,
So we'll be talking about sapsucker damage. To trees, what it is, what causes it, and what you should do about it.
All right.
Excellent. All right.
Looking forward to it.
Holes in your tree's trunk can be a cause for concern, but if you're seeing holes in a straight line, you're probably seeing sapsucker damage. In this edition of What's Bugging My Tree, we'll talk a little bit about sapsucker damage, what causes it, and what you can do about it. Sapsuckers use their beaks to peck holes in trees. These tend to be pretty small and shallow, and they're in a really distinctive pattern. They're going to be in a straight, orderly line most of the time. Most of the time this is horizontal, but sometimes it can also be vertical. After pecking these holes, the bird will then lap the sap that flows out of them with its tongue and drink that. This is very different from the type of holes that would be caused by insects. Whenever I get an email about a maple tree with holes in it, I'm relieved to see that it's sapsucker damage, that it's holes in a clear line, instead of something more damaging like the Asian longhorn beetle, which would have holes that are in no clear pattern but large holes and can really damage trees rapidly. It's an invasive we don't want to see here. Favorite tree species of sapsuckers are anything that has sweet sap and thin bark. Just like we enjoy maple trees for their syrup, sapsuckers do as well, but they also will feed on a wide range of different tree species, from birch and elm to sweet gum and even yellow poplar and many other species. In addition, lots of other things can be attracted to the sticky sap that's produced when these sapsuckers peck into trees, whether it's other wildlife or insects, or even the sooty black mold that you'll see on the side of trees. If you're seeing this damage in the eastern US, it was probably caused by a yellow-bellied sapsucker. It's a species of woodpecker that's common throughout this region and migrates, spending its winters further south and moving north in the summers. There are actually 3 other species of sapsucker, but these are native to the western part of the US. Sapsuckers have a sweet tooth, and they use their beaks to poke holes in trees and then their tongues to lap up the sap that flows from those holes. The yellow-bellied sapsucker has a red crown and, as its name implies, a somewhat yellow-colored belly. However, that can be hard to see, in part because it's not a very bright color yellow, but also because these birds will spend their time clinging to trees, hopping up and down them, with their bellies pressed to those trunks. Sapsuckers are a type of woodpecker, and there are other woodpeckers out there. Most of these don't eat the sap, but are actually eating insects inside of those trees. So when they're digging around in trees, what they're looking for is larvae. If you're seeing larger holes, that might be what they are. In addition, they might make larger holes for nests. We've seen a lot of this after the arrival of emerald ash borer, where you have ash trees that have lots of larvae in them, and you have woodpeckers and other wildlife that are trying to eat them. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is a native bird, not an invasive species and a normal part of our systems. In general, we love wildlife, we love bird watching, but the yellow-bellied sapsucker can really try your patience, especially if it's feeding on a valued landscape tree. Most of the time, they don't cause much damage, and it's a relatively minor issue. But sometimes, if there's a lot of damage, and sometimes birds do favor particular trees for whatever reason, it can seriously impact the health of those trees. However, these are protected species, they're migratory birds, so even if you wanted to do something to them, you can't. Instead, a better strategy is to discourage them from feeding or to scare them off if they come. You can cover valued tree trunks with burlap or different meshes, and there are different kind of tools to help you scare off birds, whether it's hanging reflective items in those trees or other repellents. While this is possible in some cases, it's certainly not feasible in all, and not something that you could do across a large number of trees. In general, while those birds don't damage the tree too much, they do create wounds that are perfect entry points for decay, fungi, and other issues. So promoting the health of your tree can go a long way towards giving them the ability to fight back anything that might enter through those wounds. In general, sapsuckers aren't a major concern for the health of your tree, and a better option might be to sit back and enjoy the wildlife. Thanks for joining me today and learning a little bit more about sapsucker damage. If you'd like to learn more, make sure to check us out online and follow us on social media.
Well, thank you for that, Ellen. We greatly appreciate it. And you would think that all those holes would kill the tree, though.
Well, they're quite shallow, and trees are amazingly resilient.
Mhm.
So they really don't, the sapsuckers, what they want is the sap, right? And that's just going to be in the outermost layers of that tree, the part of the tree that's moving water from the roots up into the leaves, that's moving sugars from the leaves onto the roots. It's just that little outermost part, but it's really important for the tree. This is a normal thing that happens. Most of our trees are really resilient, and they're just going to wound over that damage. But you will see trees that have just been completely hammered with this, especially if they're smaller trees that have just been covered. What can happen is it can basically strangle that tree, because that same area that those sapsuckers are going for is the part the tree needs to live. But really, that's quite rare. And more what you'll see are kind of the lines on trees, which can cause people to be concerned. But as I mentioned, I'm always happy when I see that versus something else that could be more damaging. And if you're interested in learning more about this, Dr. Matt Springer has a fact sheet on sapsucker damage. And one of the things that I mentioned was different types of kind of management techniques and repellents you can use. Matt, if you're still there, you're welcome to join us and talk a little bit about some of those options.
I said it was the Matt show.
I'm back again. Yeah. So as Ellen mentioned in her video there, woodpeckers and dealing with woodpeckers is complicated because of their federal protection. There's, the deterrents that are available are potentially effective in individualized situations. There's a bunch out there, including the pie tins, silver tape, reflective tape, predator decoys, and a lot of the ability to use them with success comes down to how long that bird has been using the wells they've created, because they will actually, it's almost like the trees are cultural to them, and they will return to them year after year and create a very intricate network of wells to get to the sap, where sometimes the entire tree seems to be covered with them and still alive and kicking, which I believe is Ellen's point. But if that's the case, where that tree's been used for potentially years and years and years, you're going to have a hard time repelling that bird from the use of that tree. Now, if they have just started using an individual tree, then you stand a better chance at trying to deter them with one or many of those devices. It may be good if you are planning on trying to block the wells with burlap or screen, to also employ some kind of deterrent along with it. Otherwise, you just may motivate the bird to create a new well just above your block. So they are frustrating. That's really what it comes down to. And they're incredibly frustrating. And it's just good that in many cases, they do not cause any problems with the tree.
Yeah, one of the trees that I showed is a tree near my house, and it is completely covered with holes, like completely covered. And yet the tree is doing fine. And I think part of that is to the tree species. This one has a really good wound response and effectively compartmentalizes any of that damage. And also because of the fact that that tree is thriving, so it's clearly growing really well. It has the energy to deal with that. And because the way that the sapsucker packs into those trees, it's not like they're all kind of connected and immediately adjacent to each other. There's a little bit of space between each one of those holes that as long as the tree is growing well otherwise, it can probably still do everything it needs to do.
That's interesting. So do they like certain trees over other trees? Like is some
Maples, they're like
maples?
us. They like maples. We like
They
the
like
sap.
maple
They
syrup,
like
huh?
the sap. Yeah. I mean, it's sweet. It's got thin bark, so they can easily peck through it. What's not to like?
Right.
But you'll see that damage on all sorts of trees. What you probably won't see as much is trees with thick bark. That's a lot of work for those small birds.
I know some of those birds were very precise. I mean, it was a straight line. I was like, I couldn't do that. They were good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the telltale sign if it's in this straight line or if it's got this really kind of geometric pattern, because sometimes they might flake off the bark a little bit into these squares. But if it's got this super consistent geometric pattern, to me, that yells sapsucker damage versus an insect that would not be as kind of orderly. The insect holes, when you see them, a lot of times what you're seeing are the emergence holes. So there's been a larvae feeding in that tree, and then it chews its way out. It emerges as an adult. Frequently, that's what some of those holes are. And they don't, they're not all coordinated when they're doing this.
Are there several different types of sapsuckers then?
There are different species, but not for us. I think we only have the yellow-bellied sapsucker here.
Just one. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But if you go to the Western US, you'll find other species, but this sapsucker, you won't see it all year round, right, Matt?
Correct. It's a winter migrant. So they're just showing up. And that's part of the reason they're here is because the sap is going to be flowing a little better here than say up north where they spend their summers. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you both. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, great
Thank you.
content.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want me to leave or should I stick around?
I was going to tell everybody, welcome to the Matt Springer Show.
Yes, we're no longer called From the Woods Today. It's the Matt Springer Show.
No, a big thanks really to all of our guests, including Dr. Matt Springer, Dr. Ellen Crocker, and Laurie Thomas. Covered a lot of ground about trees, heard about sapsucker damage, heard about wildlife-friendly trees, and heard about the Christmas trees and, what you can do about finding one, how you can care for it, and what you can do after Christmas. So,
and next week there's a big extension conference, so we will not be live next week. It's
the exciting 2021 Kentucky State Extension Conference, and we're just so excited to see so many of our colleagues from across the state. This is for our county extension agents and folks here on campus to kind of get together and rejuvenate and recharge and hit the ground running for 2022. So we look forward to seeing a lot of our county extension agents and others there, and we will catch up with everybody else on December 15th.
Yes, and we have a very interesting show that day. It's the story of the Christmas tree.
Yeah, so don't miss that.
Don't miss that.
It's a good one, and we appreciate y'all being with us throughout this year. It's been a great year for the show. We've gotten some good recognition from it, and we appreciate you all because we're trying to serve you all with it. So please let others know if they don't know about the show, they may enjoy it. And remember, all the recordings are there available if people wanted to watch them.
They are. You can go to FromTheWoodsToday.com and you can see every recording that we've ever done since April of 2020. So it's been, or 2019, I guess. It's been a while. So, but anyway, Billy, one thing we haven't mentioned is that the award that we won.
We did. Whether you know it or not, the From the Woods Today show was recognized by the National Association of University Forestry Programs, as well as the National Woodland Owners Association for outstanding individual program in response to the COVID pandemic to support family forest here in the U.S. So we're really appreciative of that recognition. But really, it's not about us. It's about
No.
you all. It's about our woodland owners. It's about our county agents, and it's about our partners out there trying to do good work. So we're just glad to be a conduit to help get that good information out. And we appreciate all of our guests that have been on here, all of our viewers, all of the interaction we've had with you all. It's been a wonderful experience. So thanks to all.
Because we definitely would not have won that without our viewership. So we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
So again, we are finished with our segments for today. So we greatly appreciate it. Remember, we won't be on next week, but we will see you again on the 15th. Until then, take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.